Hey, folks. Welcome to Friendly Orbit, the podcast that draws us together no matter how far we fly. I'm Ceres, here to take no pity on the big city, and I'm joined by...
Worst movie date planner. It's yours truly, Theia.
What are we doing this week, Theia?
We're at the end of the road! The Mind Killer, the Void, the white and gold horror that melts your soul. Today we're concluding Head Up Your Ass with Theia. The episode series where I force Ceres to watch movies written, directed, and produced by a single visionary auteur so brilliant and acclaimed that they shoot their career in the foot forever.
I have to say, after the first one, I was already at the end of my rope. But I guess this is finally the conclusion.
Yes, and there's no better movie to end this than Megalopolis. Ceres, what do you know about Megalopolis?
I don't know much. I don't know much about Megalopolis. I've heard it's very bad. I know it's got like an aesthetic that's like very much gold. I know it's got Aubrey Plaza and Adam Driver in it. And hey, those are cool actors and actresses. I have also been spoiled one fragment of a scene from the movie.
Which one?
Which was Aubrey Plaza and another guy walk into the bedroom of some old guy in his bed. Then he whips the blanket off of his lap and says, "How do you like my boner?" and is wielding a crossbow, which is what was creating the tent under the blanket. There's a little special effect with a little ding on the sharp edge of the crossbow bolt, and then he shoots Aubrey Plaza, and she dies. So that wasn't like a rave review for Megalopolis. I have to say, it didn't make me want to watch the movie anymore.
Very well.
Then I wanted to watch it at the beginning.
Yeah.
But here we are. So that's all. I mean, presumably it's about a big city.
How do you like my boner? I did know about this. All right. Yeah. You're right. Aubrey Plaza and other actor that you brought up?
Adam Driver.
Great actors.
Mm-hmm.
Not the only actors in this movie. Notably, Shia LaBeouf is in this movie. Don't you love Shia LaBeouf?
Well, I like Transformers 1.
Best one of the series. That's what everybody says.
The Shia LaBeouf song where Shia LaBeouf is a cannibal and wants to eat you. That song's pretty funny.
Yeah. The Shia LaBeouf allegations.
I don't know about those.
You don't know about those?
No. All right. Well, maybe Transformers 1 is about to be ruined for you.
Actually, from what I know, the worst thing that Shia LaBeouf has done that is like confirmed is that he made a movie where he interprets like essentially like a honey boy whose father exploits his success in the entertainment industry and makes bad choices for him that make a lot of money for the dad. And he talked in interviews about how kind of like that's based on his own experience. And then like 2 years later he said that actually his dad was like a cool guy and did nothing wrong. But it was just like, he was like on tour promoting his movie.
Yeah. Let's just say it's real. Let's just say my dad abused me. I'm sure there could be
his father.
There could be no negative repercussions for this. Was that second interview like a week after Thanksgiving or something? 3 days after Christmas?
Yeah.
Dad got it. Son, I really feel like I tried my hardest to make good decisions for you, not for me.
Yeah.
I didn't know you felt like this. Can we maybe talk about it?
Can we talk about this? Yeah. But I think that this movie is really, as all movies should be, about the director, the visionary, the auteur. And what the greatest auteur there is than Francis Ford Coppola. Apocalypse Now, Dracula, The Godfather. What a man.
I'm really glad that my second Francis Ford Coppola movie that I'm watching is not The Godfather Part 2, but Megalopolis.
We start at the beginning and now we're at the end already.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you can interpolate everything else.
Yeah, I don't know what that says about like The Godfather Part 3. How many boners will that have?
So, in 1977, during filming Apocalypse Now, Francis Ford Coppola had the idea for Megalopolis. And in the early 1980s, he wrote the first version of the script.
So this movie has been in development for 50 years.
50 years. Now, I don't have an official source on this, but I have, like, secondary source on this. quoting that the script has gone through over 200 versions.
Mm-hmm.
He was really close to making it in
Mm-hmm.
in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
With actors of the time like Robert De Niro and Uma Thurman attached to the project. But then something happened that made a movie about rebuilding New York kind of hard to sell. Can you imagine what could have happened in 2001?
Yeah, 9/11? Yeah.
No, much like Lilo and Stitch, this movie was derailed by 9/11.
That's interesting, because rebuilding New York feels like it would be fine after 9/11. So it must be, rebuilding New York must be a bad thing in the movie or somehow.
Well, rebuilding New York after it gets destroyed, certain imagery you just couldn't show at the time. So yeah, other facts. No, when the current version of the scripts, no distributor company wanted to make it, to the point that Francis Ford Coppola had to sell basically all of his estate, which I'm sure his children are thrilled by. he had actually a very successful line of like wineries and like resorts, and he sold them all to finance this movie. Which the official budget was 120 millions. According to him, he barely managed to stay within. And he had to do it by firing a lot of people, a lot of art directors, a lot of the art stuff. But other people said he went over budget, but only about 18 millions. But point being,
only 18 million.
18 millions. But he was quite close to bankrupting his entire family with this movie, like by his own admission.
Boy.
Yeah. Coppola adopted an experimental style, encouraging his actors to improvise and write certain scenes during the shoot, and adding his own last-minute changes of the script, which you can imagine work super well in a giant production like this.
After 200 revisions, what are a few more last-minute revisions?
Yeah. He would often come up with new ideas on the spot. A crew member recounted that Coppola frequently arrived on set in the mornings before major sequences without a clear plan. Since he refused to let his collaborators establish one, because why delegate? He is the most beautiful mind of the entire planet, the greatest creative there is.
He knows how the movie needs to be.
Yeah, he knows how the movie needs to be. He often spent hours in his trailer avoiding communication and reportedly smoking marijuana.
Perfect.
Yeah. So, I'm getting a lot of feeling that he had an idea of wanting to be kind of like an independent movie maker with like a small production, and like which can be managed by a single person. A good person who is good at making movies, like Francis Ford Coppola, could theoretically do. But at the same time, he wanted to make this giant movie that necessarily requires just a huge cast, a big crew, and you just have to delegate, my guy. And yeah,
I have a feeling
this is like the end life crisis movie. This is like the end life crisis movie.
Yeah, I feel like there's a reason this movie. I feel like this movie is like one of those ideas that got away, where it's like, I had this really cool idea for this thing, and I always wanted to do something with it, but I never seemed to get around to it. And it's like, the reason you never really got around to it is because it's not a great idea in practice. And so there was always a more convenient, more practicable idea to do first. And so this is at the end of the selection process, the least practical idea for which you have now the most nostalgia, that like in an authorial sense, if you were writing a novel, this is your darling, you would have to kill.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's kind of what it feels like to me.
Yeah. In 2022, Coppola fired almost the entire visual effect department, and more left on their own to unstable work environments. Coppola was accused of sexually harassing scantily clad extras during the filming of a scene in a club, and was sued for his behavior by the agency that provided the models, with video evidence of the interaction with the women backing it up. He said that, like, kissing women is a sign of respect from, like, whatever culture he grew up in the 1950s, I don't know, and showed images of him showing his niece on the cheek as evidence. He also was accused of trying to pull the women onto his lap and making them call him uncle. He sued back for libel and has claimed that the video evidence was faked, something that is very funny considering a certain scene in this movie.
Okay.
Which I'm sure when you'll see it, you'll be like, "Oh, that's what Theia meant."
Yeah, I mean, that's not great. Sympathy decreasing overall.
Yep. Francis Ford Coppola stated that he wanted to make the movie to not be like woke, and so hired actors that has been criticized for their political views on both sides of the spectrum, both very progressive and very very conservative.
So you don't like... I just want to fully understand the rationale here. Is you don't like politics in movies, so...
He was like, oh, we get from both sides of the spectrum, the fascists and the radical anarchists. You know, we have Aubrey Plaza and John Voight. Well, by the way, John Voight cast in a role that apparently is very similar to Donald Trump, which is something that I found in a Rolling Stones interview. They asked him if he wanted to make like a certain statement with that, and then he just like said this thing about not wanting it to be woke. But yeah, he took this actor who's very right-wing and very outspokenly pro-Trump, and then cast him in a position, in a role that looks a lot like Trump.
It's just interesting to me because it's like, oh, I don't want to be woke, right? Is it because you don't want to be... Is it because I get the feeling that it's like, oh, I don't want politics in my movies, so I'm going to take political outcasts from both sides.
This is an extremely political movie.
Which is in and of itself a political thing to do, to specifically focus on outcasts to put in your movie. Yeah. So that's what's interesting about it.
That's also why we have Shia LaBeouf in here.
Let me see.
Yeah. Finally, in 2024, when test audience and critic reception before the release of the movie was negative, the marketing department released a trailer that showed all the negative reception by critics that Coppola's previous movies had received before becoming classics, such as The Godfather and Apocalypse Now. They went in so far as to quote specific movie critics of the time. Later, the trailer was retracted with an apology to those critics for having fabricated most of those quotes.
Roll the intro!
Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff.
Well, Theia, I didn't think very much of his boner.
Thoroughly unimpressed.
Thoroughly unimpressed by his boner. All right, we just watched Megalopolis. I started the movie with a headache. I ended it with a far worse So let's just talk about it.
Yeah. First impressions. If it wasn't clear enough, Ceres, what did you think about this movie?
What do I think about this movie? I think Megalopolis is a vapid pastiche of positive imagery related to creativity and future planning that doesn't really communicate about anything in a concrete way, either in the world of the movie or that translates in a way to our real world. It's full of just empty statements and platitudes like, a utopia is a place where we ask all the right questions, or utopias don't bring up the appropriate, don't have hand-ready answers. I can't remember. Utopias don't have ready answers.
Yeah.
And it's just, like, ultimately, I think vapid is the right word. It's just kind of like, each of these statements in a romantic or poetic sense might have some kind of meaning if you wrote a whole book about them to explain where that meaning comes from. Like, each of them feels as though they have meaning, but there's actually no substance to any of the stuff that's really mentioned. The few themes that are there that are like expanded on are mildly interesting, but it's really, at the end of the day, it's such a big movie in so little time with so little explanation that it kind of tries to be about everything. Because of that, ends up being kind of about nothing.
Yeah.
That's my summary.
Yeah, I said earlier, I talked about how this movie was conceived in 1977 and then went through so many edits. And, like, I really have the impression that this is, like, the idea of a young, up-and-coming, left-leaning director from the 1977 that then has, like, had 50 years to kind of, like, slowly rot and pick up all of his complaints with modern society along the way.
Yeah.
And these have kind of like swallowed up what probably was the core concept of a movie of a young man trying to change the world for the better.
Yeah.
And it's just like an unscrutable mess.
Yeah.
Like thematically, we'll get into it. It's a huge mess. You already said a lot about that. But even just plot wise, there's just so much plot here to cover, and it's done with no elegance, no subtext, no nuance, not enough time. Like this movie might actually benefit in terms of structure from like another hour of content. It would still be unbearable, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. Right? That's the temptation. And I really thank this movie for only being 2 hours long, because it didn't need to be a second longer. Like it didn't need to exist in this world any more minutes than it already does. But yes, I think you're right. I think one of the universal things about bad movies is they have too much plot for the time frame, and they somehow can't find a way to fit that plot in. And so the Zack Snyder way of doing it is to just make a 5-hour nothing fest, right?
I was gonna say, I mean, Rebel Moon has very little plot.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
If anything, it's the other way around.
And this movie, right? And the Avatar: The Last Airbender strategy is to just like cut out like as many interstitial pieces as you can. And this movie goes more towards that first movie's philosophy, where it's just like you can see their story beats, but none of them are really paid off, right?
Yeah, there's a story beat. There's an entire story beat. We'll get into it. But like there's an entire story beat, which is like the main character being posed like a difficult dilemma.
Yeah.
Where he has to prioritize either his personal life or his professional ambition.
Yeah.
And like his choice is entirely implied and never
paid off.
Never paid off, and there's no consequences.
Yeah.
It's just kind of skipped, and it's really shook me, and that's one of the moments that also really made me think that like the thing that I said about this being like the 1977 plot, but then collecting all this kind of like poison that is because it really feels like that was the moment where I felt for the first time in the movie, this is the story.
Yeah,
that dilemma was the first time that I thought this is a clear choice.
This is what the narrative is about.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I feel like the movie is kind of like, it's all scar tissue at this point. It used to be, like a hand or a finger or something, right? And over 200 in edits, it's just all scar tissue at this point. None of it really connects. None of it really makes sense. It feels to me like a movie that was his idealistic, conceptual, miscellaneous bin on his computer. And like basically everything he didn't get to talk about in every other movie slowly somehow found its way into Megalopolis, which means Megalopolis is just like it's a like pocket full of feeling and a whiff of fresh air, and it's like there's no real meaning, there's no real cohesion to any of it. It's just kind of like, what if Megalopolis, the movie that dares to ask, what if the future was like better, yo? It's like, the same way. I guess, what if? That would be nice, wouldn't it? And Megalopolis is brave enough to answer, yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, it's truly is like the back door to Francis Ford Coppola's mind.
Yeah.
It's like if you went to his brain and like in the back room with all these weird ideas.
I mean, I really feel like if you had to put into like one sentence, if you had to summarize the themes of the movie, I think the most accurate summary is like, well, what if the world was kind of bad, but artists, they made it better? You know what I mean? And it's like
artists like Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah.
It's truly incredible. I think in the same way that Rebel Moon was about if there was an evil government that killed people at random and pursued sexual assault, we shouldn't put up with that.
Wouldn't that be bad? Yeah, shouldn't we maybe not do that? Yeah, and I think this movie is like, if we could make the world better, should we? And it's we should. So let's talk about the plot of the movie.
How does this movie start, series?
This movie, I don't even remember, man.
This movie starts with
it's the nightclub.
Caesar Catalina.
Yes.
Our wonderful creative.
Caesar Catalina, played by Adam Driver. Is a genius, talented architect working in the city of New York, except it's called New Rome.
Yeah. He climbs on top of the floor of the Empire State Building. he looks down, and then he almost jumps, but at the last moment he yells, "Time stop!" And then time stops, and gravity stops working.
And he can sort of move himself back from his leaned forward position.
So gravity still works, because he's, standing on the rope. But specifically, it doesn't work, as in he doesn't fall down.
Yeah. And you may be thinking to yourself, time travel movie. No. You'd be surprised to find out that time stopping is never relevant at any point in this movie.
It's kind of a metaphor about something.
About his creative power, I think.
About his creative power, yeah, about his belief in his dreams. I don't know, yeah. But yeah, then we
But you're right, that is the first scene.
That is the first scene. But we don't have to go scene by scene. I just wanted to point out, to introduce how early this concept of time stop was introduced and how little it matters. We can spend the entire movie not bringing it up anymore.
Yeah, it's really, it doesn't matter for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
So
then we're introduced.
It's like decadence parties, right?
Decadence parties.
It's all like Rome fell because of decadence. If you've heard that old trope before, it feels a lot like that. We're seeing a club and people are dressing in all these fancy clothes and they're drinking and they're eating.
And women are indulging in sapphic love.
Yeah, and the women are kissing one another for our pervy Francis Ford Coppola display. The whole movie is very pervy like that, and it's pretty uncomfortable, to be honest. You just feel like you can feel this horny 80-year-old man behind the lens, and every shot he's like, more cleavage, less dress.
Yeah.
More women kissing one another. This is what art is about, baby.
Women in this movie there's their word for a complex when a man has very much the idea that the women can only be two things, really. Either virginal,
exactly.
or sluts.
Whores.
Yeah.
Whores all of them.
Yeah, this movie is arguably the, what's the Maria?
Madonna whore.
Madonna whore complex. The Madonna whore complex.
Yeah.
Though there is a third archetype, crone. We have two old women.
Yeah, it's a very misogynistic movie, for sure. But yeah, so we have this club and we have all this decadence, and it serves to introduce us to some of our characters. Julia Cicero, I guess, is her last name.
Julia Cicero. Yeah, so our cast is like Julia Cicero is the daughter of Major Franklin Cicero.
Yeah. Who is an actress we recognized, but we could not place her name.
Yeah, for those who watch Game of Thrones, it's Miss Sunday.
Yeah.
And so and Major Franklin Cicero is the mayor of the city. He's not introduced here yet, but I think it's good if we start.
Yeah. He's played by Giancarlo Esposito.
Yes, another victim
of this movie. Right. And so Julia, at this point in time in the club scene, is sort of living the life of a vapid socialite who doesn't really think about art or the meaning of life, and is just sort of like enjoying life in a hedonistic way. And as we'll get to know him later, Franklin Cicero is all about like realism and live in the moment and don't think about the future, and like art doesn't matter. We have to solve the problems we have in front of us, which in other works might be praised as a pragmatic and sensible approach towards governance.
No, because in the new area of New Rome, he wants to build a casino. So he's bad.
Oh, that's true. He did want to build a casino. That was kind of bad.
Yeah,
it's kind of funny that nobody challenged him throughout the course of the movie. Like, how does building a casino meet people's housing needs?
It's really odd. I think the casino really feels like they inserted it at the last moment.
Yeah.
Because for the rest of the movie, he's basically saying, solve the problem of the people one step at a time. Don't come up with some crazy project that may pay off in 20 years.
Yeah, he's like a pragmatist who's like, let's build a hospital today, not a utopia in 10 years.
But what does he know? He's not an artist.
Yeah,
he's not genius like Francis Ford Coppola.
He can't stop time. We also get introduced to our main bad guy in the club scene, who's Claudio, which is strange that it's not Pulcher? I don't know. It's strange that he's not Claudius, because again, it's all Rome themed. Like it's going to be very bad Rome metaphors that are ignorant of most of the history of Rome throughout the whole movie.
I have a whole thing about the Colosseum later.
Yeah. But so we get to meet him. He's played by Shia LaBeouf, and he's a villain you've seen 27 times before. He's got like edible complexes. He wants to sleep with his sisters. He wants to sleep with his cousins.
He does sleep with his sisters. According to the rumors.
According to rumors. He's a
Cross-dressers.
dilettante. He's a cross-dresser. How fucking dare he defy gender norms and wear a dress. That's how you really know he's evil.
He's very much kind of like a queer-coded villain.
Yeah.
Except that in the end, he will be a right-wing fascist.
Yeah. Well, but he only gets better, I feel like, as the movie progresses. Like, the lowest point is when we see him in the beginning, and then when he has the drag scene.
No, yeah, the drag scene. The drag scene is the worst.
And I feel like once we're done with that, like, Act 1, he only gets better as a character, as a villain.
When does the Act 1 end, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway,
okay, so we get to meet some of our primary characters. The scene really doesn't do much other than just show off, like, consumerism and luxury and hedonism and whatever.
And then we move to our first confrontation.
Yes.
Introduction of Mayor Franklin Cicero. He announced that these buildings that Catalina has flattened, these old residential areas.
Exactly. Catalina basically, it's very weird. It's not explained very well. He's the director of, what was it called?
Parks and something.
Yeah, the department of, like, I don't know. Basically, there seems to be some sort of architectural department of the city of New York that has vast authority to destroy and build buildings, of which Catalina is the main office holder. But he is explicitly stated in one point not elected, and yet the mayor hates him. You know, if he's not elected, you would assume he's appointed by probably the mayor, right?
Yeah.
And so it's all a very weird relationship because Catalina is kind of this character who is vastly powerful. He demolishes a whole block of buildings to build his megalopolis.
Poorly, we may add.
Yeah, he demolishes it very poorly. If you've seen a professional demolishing of a building online or in real life, it doesn't look right in the movie. Because the building's going everywhere, you know, it's not collapsing into itself.
He demolishes with the same approach that Godzilla demolishes the building, the same level of like collateral damage and debris.
Yeah, but so he can just do this, right? Even though like people used to live in that building and were complaining about it being destroyed and stuff like that. And anyways, he and the mayor confront one another in what basically appears to be a public debate.
Yeah. And how does Caesar elaborate? How does he introduce? His philosophy.
Well, first, Franklin speaks first, right?
Yeah.
So Franklin Cicero speaks first, and he expresses much of the opinions that we said before. He says we need to build a casino, and we don't need to look to the future, and we don't need to be creative, and we need to solve the problems that people have right now. And by the way, Mayor Franklin Cicero is very unpopular throughout the whole movie. So every time he speaks, there's like somebody in the background booing, which I thought was a very funny, consistent audio cue. Every time he walks into anywhere, there's like the same guy going, boo.
Yeah, I don't think, this movie has, like, I don't know, it's strange how little thought through the political landscape of this world seems to be, considering how central it is.
I mean, it's so little considered that, like, the money shown in the movie has the United States of America written on it, and New Rome is described variously as a city and as a country, which would imply that there is no America. If New Rome is really a country, then it would imply that like it's sort of like the Roman Empire is the USA. You know?
Even just like in general, like the money that is shown, and you're wondering how much can money be shown? No. There's like it takes up the entire screen at some point. A note
in vivid detail, two different shots.
Yeah, and it's just an American note. There's nothing.
It's got Benjamin Franklin on it. It's like there's nothing that makes it at all look like New Rome.
Yeah, it's not a hybrid or anything. It's not this America, but then there's a Roman temple on it. Yeah. It's just,
Where otherwise in the movie, they're very committed to the bit. The police have like New Rome Police Department.
Yeah, SPQR.
On the caps and stuff like that,
So what does, how does Adam Driver elaborate?
So Adam Driver, Cicero Catalina, comes in and basically does the full Hamlet, to be or not to be.
The whole thing.
Like, it's very long. He does a lot of it, and he does it in like this kind of weird acty way where he's changing up his tempo of how he's speaking and the meter of how he's speaking quite a bit as he talks, with like pauses and then rapid parts. So especially towards the end, it becomes very difficult to understand what the fuck he's saying. But it's funny because it's literally like 30 seconds of movie time are just Shakespeare.
It's very high school movie production in terms of just like acting. He's overdoing it.
And then And then he does another quote at the end of his speech, which is, he says to Franklin Cicero, why think of the future? In a sarcastic way, he's saying that, right? And he's saying, why would we think of the future? You just want people to spend money they don't have on things they don't need to imitate people they don't like. Which both of us immediately clocked, are like, that is a quote I've heard before online.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Tyler Durden from Fight Club.
Yeah. I don't know where it's from, but it's like definitely not original to this movie. So it's very funny in a way that Caesar Catalina's first appearance to us as an audience, where he gets to express his opinions, is 2 long borrowed quotes that are not his.
It's just regurgitating other people's opinions. And great job.
Side note, Caesar is a last name. It bugs me that his first name is Caesar.
He's Caesar Catalina because, Coppola didn't know if he would make this guy to be the stand-in for Caesar, the stand-in for Catalina, and he was like, you know what, I can do it both.
I can do both. And that's the other thing with the Roman metaphors that bugs us, is all the Roman metaphors in the movie indicate this is the fall of the Republic and then the rise of the Empire. But that would be a bad thing, right? Caesar's empire was not good. It was an autocracy, right? And also, it wasn't the fall of Rome, as they keep saying, right?
Yeah, the movie very much frames it like we're witnessing the fall of Rome as we're witnessing the fall of America. And hey, I don't know what's going on in America. Maybe America is about to turn into a very successful autocracy for a couple of centuries.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it past them. But
yeah, it's weird. It's weird because it makes it seem like it's the fall of Rome, but they're using all these characters like Cicero and Caesar who are very far from the fall of Rome, right? And Caesar is our good guy, not our bad guy, even though he causes the fall of the Republic, which, generally speaking, as modern audiences, we would consider to be a bad guy move. But anyway, so they have this verbal battle.
Francis Ford Coppola was watching Revenge of the Sith and not understanding it at all.
Yeah, so they have this verbal battle, and it shows us basically that the mayor and the architect don't like each other. The next scene expands on this relationship,
Yeah,
because we get to see the mayor's daughter, Julia Cicero, visiting Caesar in his loft, I don't know, architect's apartment.
Studio.
Yeah, exactly.
Where they are building a beautiful model out of trash. This is the city of the future.
Of Megalopolis.
There's literally a traffic cone. It's used to symbolize a building.
Yeah. And she walks through it blindfolded, and she feels, and this is the beginning of the vague platitudes of the movie, she feels the spiritual sense of a new city in which people grow and learn from one another and talk to each other and ask questions.
And all of this is possible thanks to what?
Megalon.
What is Megalon?
Megalon is the new substance Megalopolis will be built out of, which is never really described. We learn later that the principle for creating Megalon was discovered by Caesar in the throes of his grief for his dead pregnant wife, because of course he had a dead pregnant wife who was pregnant with twins.
How are we supposed to explain his misogyny?
Exactly. How can we excuse any of this man's behavior if he doesn't have a dead pregnant wife who died with twins?
He has a dead pregnant wife called Sunny Hope.
Yeah, called Sunny Hope.
Pregnant with twins.
Sunny Hope died that day.
Sunny Hope died that day. And therefore, he is awful to women in his life.
He's awful. Yeah, but so Megalon is just like fantasy substance. It's never fully explained what properties it has. You can apparently see through it under the right circumstances, but then they also explain that away with like cameras and screens. So it's not really fully clear, but it's some magical movie metal of the future that Megalopolis is going to be built out of. And him and Julia exchange words. He's very rude to Julia. He is very condescending to her. He said, she's like, studied a year at medical school. And he goes, oh, 1 year of medical school? 1 year of medical school? You think that entitles you to study the likes of my Emersonian mind?
To which, wait, what the fuck does Emersonian mean?
Let's look it up.
Okay.
I have no idea. To which she goes, entitles me? And
yes.
Yeah. And she goes, entitles me?
Yes.
She goes, entitles me?
Yes. And then bobbing his head like a bobblehead. Go back to the club.
This is like so this whole movie, this is maybe a good point to talk about. This whole movie has like crazy stilted weird dialogue when it's not like vague semi-reasonable vapid platitudes about reality in the future and how humans work together and learn from one another and perfect their minds and bodies and whatever vague positive stuff is happening from living in better housing, which is like, I've never seen a movie that believes more in housing than this one, by the way. Just living in the right house will turn you into a perfect person. You don't need to do anything else.
People are perfecting their bodies and minds,
Yeah.
and talking about the real issues, which is what the utopia is all about.
And utopia is talking about the real issues, not about solving it. That's
Anyway,
kind of the moral of the movie.
I have the
But-
Emersonian mind.
But when the movie is not about like, when the movie is not vague platitudes like that, it's either crass sexual dialogue or like very stilted, awkward sounding interactions with people.
Yes.
Which is, I think you actually can feel this quote unquote experimental technique of characters just making up lines on screen. I think you can actually feel it. There's one scene where Caesar's being locked up and Julia's protesting, and she just keeps saying the same thing over and over. She says 7 times or so in the scene. She says,
"This is not.
This is
right.
wrong.
This
You're wrong. This is not right. Stop this," right? And she keeps saying the same formulation over, and it feels to me like an improviser who's stuck and doesn't know what to say next.
Yeah.
For their line is just filling time.
Yeah.
Tell us about an Emersonian mind.
The Emersonian mind refers to the philosophical perspective and mindset associated with the American essayist and transcendentalist philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Okay, that's who I thought it was. All right.
It's characterized by focus on intuition, individualism, self-reliance, and the interconnectedness of all things with larger spiritual reality. That's very strange.
Yeah, individualism and the connectedness of all
Self-reliance and the interconnectedness of all things. It's like if Ayn Rand and Karl Marx had a baby.
Like, look, we're all connected on a spiritual level to one another, but that doesn't mean you gotta come over to my house and ask me for help. All right?
Emerson believed in the power of the individual mind to connect with the universal or divine mind, influencing his philosophy and writing. So basically, it's like, yes, we are all connected, but like the connection has to go through the divine,
Yeah.
not through the physical.
Not through one another.
That's why I don't donate to charity.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't donate to charity, but I practice Zen Buddhism.
Exactly.
So
I think big thoughts in my studio
Yeah.
apartment.
I do connect to the poor
Yeah.
through the divine.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
But so yeah, they interact with one another, and for some unknowable reason, Julia becomes smitten.
Truly unknowable.
With Caesar, and Caesar decides, I guess, that for a woman she ain't so bad. And we move on to the next scene of the movie, or the next part of the movie, which is basically, it's the arena scene, right?
I mean, yeah, I think there's some more stuff in the middle. Essentially, we explore like a little bit more the bond between the two of them and how this is eroding her relationship with her father.
Yeah.
Also,
I mean, this is the
we
main tension of the movie, right? The main
Yeah.
tension of the movie, right, is Franklin Cicero hates I always want to say Ceres, Caesar Catalina, right?
Yes.
And Caesar Catalina is dating Julia Cicero, Franklin Cicero's daughter, right? That's the main tension that
But
the movie is
Ceres.
built around.
Who have we forgotten in all of this?
Claudio, I guess.
No, we have brought up Claudia.
Oh,
Who is the third victim of this
oh,
movie?
Francis
Yes.
and Aubrey Plaza
and Aubrey Plaza.
Platinum Wow.
No, Wow Platinum.
Yeah.
Wow first name.
So
Platinum.
Aubrey Plaza plays a character who's a news anchor called Wow Platinum, who has some of the worst and most dehumanizing lines in the movie, such as, "Oh, you're so organized and type A, you're anal. I, on the other hand, am totally oral." And then she goes to give the guy a blowjob. So that was demeaning and bad and awful. She does other things.
So what I think we will forget about her for a while in
Yeah.
the movie, but just to set up, essentially she is by the definition of a gold digger.
Yeah.
She's in the beginning of the movie, she's basically presented to have an ongoing affair with Caesar Catalina.
Yeah.
But he doesn't go public. He's not willing to go public with her.
Yeah.
Basically, the moment this is introduced, she immediately looks at the screen where Crassus, who is Caesar's uncle, who is really wealthy, controls the National Bank of Rome, is like...
And allegedly making billions every second.
Yeah, is like talking in an interview where he was interviewing him. They're broadcasting her interview of him, and he's constantly making just crass moves on her, and she's just kind of like enjoying it, but also rejecting his advances. And then the next moment, they're getting married.
Yeah.
And this is why we're at the Colosseum. I want to bring it up.
Yeah, you're right.
Because now we move to the scene of the Colosseum where we're celebrating the marriage between Wild Platinum and Crassus.
Yeah, and so she's just a total gold digger. He's totally clueless.
Is he?
I think he's mostly clueless. I don't know if he's totally clueless, but he comes across as very like old and inept, right? And we're at the Colosseum, because there was only one in ancient Rome,
Yeah. So should I go off for a tangent now, or do you want to say some more things before I go off on a tangent?
No, do it.
Okay. It's not the Colosseum. So ancient Rome built colosseums, which are essentially very large arenas, entertainment arenas, but it's not the Colosseum. There's many. There were many in Italy. We still have another one other than the one of Rome. The other one that is very well conserved is in Verona. But there's others in Europe. There was one in Bordeaux. Now only a small slice survives.
Because of the French Revolution. But
hey, they kept a slice. They had the whole thing. Anyways, other rant, different podcast, different episode. But yeah, the Colosseums are round and they tend to be fighting arenas.
Yeah.
Instead.
But what if I wanted to race a horse?
If you wanted to race a horse in
Rome,
Rome,
might need more space than a tight fighting arena.
You might need a smaller space. And for that, there was a unique monument construction. It was unique to Rome.
Ah, interesting.
Called the Circus Maximum.
What does that mean?
It means it's the biggest racing track. It is the biggest ring.
Yeah.
And it's
circus means circle in this case. So this is the big circle.
Yeah, and it's a much bigger, oblong, so like rectangular, essentially, racing track where they would go to race horses.
Yeah, it seems convenient. It's nice and big.
It's inconvenient. It's not as famous because it's mostly destroyed, unlike the Colosseum in Rome.
Yeah.
But it exists, and if anyone had done a little bit of research and didn't have their head up your ass
at all,
you would not call this the Colosseum, call it the circus.
So the presence of Crassus is also why I say this is all like end of the Republic characters mostly, right? But yeah, Crassus is done weirdly and wrongly, and
he's getting worried at this alleged Colosseum, which is this rectangular racing ring.
Yeah, exactly. They horse race in the Colosseum, and Theia did not like that.
It's just like, come on.
So after seeing a bunch of acrobatic performances that show the debauched and bred in games nature of Rome, which this movie has continuous narration and like texts displayed in between the different parts, in between the different acts, basically.
Narrated by Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah.
The saddest looking man on earth.
Who actually is a character in this movie, and he got like so screwed in this role. He basically just takes Adam Driver's coat in every other scene and otherwise gets to contribute basically nothing to the movie. It's like, I feel really bad for him, because I feel like he would have been like, yeah, I get to be part of an awesome Francis.
It's like Shia LaBeouf. Yeah. I don't feel bad for him.
Exactly, right?
But Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah, he hasn't had like the hugest career since The Matrix, I guess. So it's like, oh, I finally get to be part of Francis Ford Coppola.
What about his highlight in Ant-Man 2?
Ant-Man 2. Wow, what a role. And such a famous director, right? On the same level as Francis Ford Coppola, for sure. But yeah, so we have text that literally explains to us that this is the bread and circus as part of the movie.
Yes.
Because the movie is like one of the common things that all of our bad movies have together is this idea of tell, show, tell a little more, right? So this movie follows that paradigm as well.
At least in The Last Airbender, that job was given to like the actress of Katara.
Yeah.
Who is literally a Nepo baby and is not a good actress, but like Lawrence Fishburne here, and then she's also, who else is the actress of Katara?
Who?
She's the underage girl in Transformers 4, where they have to pull out the card to explain.
Yeah, she was in two movies, and those were her two movies. Oh my god!
I don't know about. I guess she's in other movies, but those are the two roles that I know her from.
Crazy.
Yeah, but in these other movies, they give that role to Lawrence Fishburne, and in like Rebel Moon, it was Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah. So after
what
all
happens?
After all of that, we go Vestal Virgin's time. You guys don't know this. This is a thing from Rome. Vesta, goddess of like purity and virginity, and there were these Vestal Virgins, right? Who were these priestesses of Vesta who would
stayed virgin.
Yeah, stayed virgins, and in that sense, preserve their purity. And Romans, in their world view of the world, in their mythology, believed this was essential for the victory and purity and health of Rome, right? And whenever Rome gets plundered, it's always a big question, were the Vestal Virgins left alone or not? It's always like a big element of history, right, is protecting the Vestal Virgins. Anyways, so our Vestal Virgin in this alternate reality is basically a pop star, yeah, who pledges that she's a virgin, says she's 16 years old, and it really uncomfortably seems like her virginity is being auctioned off to the people at the arena.
I don't think so.
I don't know if they're pledging to maintain her virginity.
Yeah, it seemed to
or
be
if
like
they're
a
pledging
sponsorship.
To take the virginity.
No, I mean, given the context of ancient Rome, you definitely the last thing you would be able to do is like purchase it, right?
Exactly.
I think that it was like sponsoring their virginity. Like they're very invested in the virginity.
It was just strange to me the way it was acted, because the only people betting were these creepy older men, and they seemed to get angry at one another whenever one of them outbid the other, right? And that gave me this uncomfortable tension about like, but why would you be mad that he added $100,000 to her virginity pledge? Didn't you just add 50? Right, and that's why it felt to me more like an auction, right?
I mean, it was an auction, but it felt like it was the auction for like sponsoring.
Who gets to make the biggest donation auction?
Basically,
what is that doesn't exist. That's not a thing.
Also, they're voting with QR codes.
If I was an auctioneer, I would never be like, "Oh, you want to donate 50,000, but he wants us to donate 100,000. You're not allowed to donate anymore. I will only take one donation.
Maybe
from one
only
person.
one person gets to be the sponsor. I don't know, but
anyways, Claudio and his henchman, who is a tubaist from a parade that he pulled out of line, and that is all we know about him, and that's 100% God's own truth. And that is all the movie gives to characterize the henchman. He's a random tubaist who's pulled out of a parade and becomes Claudio's henchman instantly. But anyways, Claudio, the jerk, is in drag to show how evil he is, because men in drag are obviously evil and contemptible in the worldview of Francis Ford Coppola.
You should use his preferred name of Claudette when he's in drag.
Is that true?
They call him Claudette.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
because he's one of them woke millennials.
Yeah, he's one of them woke transes. Anyways, so after this awful portrayal of queer-coded villains, they basically upload like a sex tape into they go to a security or someone who's managing like the jumbotron of the arena, and they're like, play this at the break, and the guy's like, no, I don't want to, and the henchman's like, do it, putz, and throws money at him and acts like he's gonna punch him.
It's really not very hard.
And then the guy just does it. It's like, all right, sure. You know what?
Just take the money and don't do it. Like, no.
Exactly. Take the money, call security. No, this guy does not. This guy's fine. He'll play the USB stick. And so it's basically a sex tape of the Vestal Virgin, of Caesar Catalina and the Vestal Virgin character sleeping with one another. And it turns out throughout the course of the movie that not only is this faked, but that she's also not 16.
And she's an immigrant?
And she's an immigrant from Indonesia, which is
faked her birth.
Which is very weird.
To be clear, I mean, this, not that it matters, but this woman does not look like she's from Indonesia at all. She's the most Caucasian, Hitler's wet dream looking girl.
It's also just funny because she has like, I mean, if she's an immigrant from Indonesia, she's still been studying English since she was a child, right? Because she's got like perfect, flawless, no accent and everything. Yeah. But yeah, it's just weird because it's not a necessary detail at all to mention, right? Yeah.
I mean, even the fact that she's not 16, but she's 23 is irrelevant.
Because the video's taped.
Because the video's fake.
So it's one of those moments where it makes you think, maybe in one of these earlier versions, only one of these two components was present in the script, and then the other one was required, but now both elements are in the script.
I would like to hope that in no version of the script did he commit statutory rape.
Yeah, but like you could imagine a version of the script where like she's actually 23, but he did sleep with her.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But then that destroys the relationship to Julia, and then maybe in this version of the script, they're like, well, actually, so no, it's faked, but then this earlier part of the dialogue is still in there, and then
it's interesting because like you can kind of like piece together the
7 different sutured together movies.
Yeah, and you can kind of like track some of like the chronology of the edits, because this thing with the Vestal Virgins probably came after the moment that he decided it wouldn't just be New York, it would be New Rome.
Yeah.
Because the Vestal Virgins only like the idea of like virginity like being like this big thing would only track in the Rome version.
Yeah.
In the Rome edit. So first came
Which, by the way, the movie absolutely feels like it's just about New York, and the Rome thing was just slapped in at some point.
Yeah.
But so after this...
So Claudia tries to take him down.
Yeah. As Caesar gets arrested.
He was also doing drugs.
It's
not very important.
It's not very important, but he was doing drugs, and he makes this quote about, like, if you pretend to be good, no one will take you seriously if you pretend to be bad, and he sort of leaves that statement hanging, and then Julia says, it'll get you killed.
Yeah.
I don't fully know what that means.
Well, he's on drugs. He also repeats this weird mantra about like jumping into like the unknown is what sets you, what makes you free.
Yeah, which also feels like a non sequitur to me. Sometimes you jump into the unknown because you have no other choice.
Yeah.
Sometimes because you have choice, you choose not the unknown. You choose the known quantity that you like. It seems like a non sequitur. He also talks about how like gods give us such power, but we invent our gods. So why can't we access that power directly? To which I would argue we do. That's most modern ideologies work on that basis. I don't know exactly what you mean. I'm not sure I understand you, but if I do understand you...
I feel like if there were two societies who would think that you can, it's America and Rome.
Like, it's like, it feels like your society does quite a lot to harness the power of the collective gods of your society directly.
Yeah. Like the Roman culture, like the Roman Colosseum served not only to just entertain its citizens, but like they would bring in people and animals from all over the world and make them fight for entertainment as a symbol of the dominance and mastery that Rome had over the world.
Yeah.
Like, look, we can bring in elephants from Africa to Rome for our entertainment. We can fill the Colosseum with water and have naval fights in the Colosseum. That's how hard we master nature. That was like, so I think
anyway, it's just more of these weird tangents. It's more of these statements that like feel like they have some poetic kernel of truth to them, maybe, but like you would actually need to get into it. Each, like, basically a whole movie could be about how jumping into the unknown shows that you are free. And a whole different movie could be about how our gods give us power, but we invent our own gods, so can't we access that power on our own? And then a whole different movie could be about how utopias are the places where we actually can discuss the problems and acknowledge the problems, instead of utopias being the places where like all answers are already given, right?
Yeah.
Or something like those are like 4 different movies, right?
Yeah.
And each could be about that theme, right?
Yeah.
So Megalopolis, at the end of the day, by talking about all of that, just becomes a movie about how good things are good and bad things are bad.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow. Yeah. I mean, it's like, our protagonist's goal is to get people to live together in communities that organically make them talk to one another, pose important questions that need to be questioned, and perfect their body and mind by interacting with one another. How can you argue against that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's just like a pastiche of positive terms.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, how...
But we never get to go enough into the detail and have a dialectic argument.
Exactly. About like, hey, this is bad. Hey, this is good. So, after this, this is a low point for Caesar, right?
I guess, yeah. Yeah. He gets thrown in jail.
Yeah.
Then we get a 30-second investigative journalism scene where everything we've discussed so far gets discovered, that he's actually not guilty.
We find the birth certificate, we figure out where she's from.
Yeah. And now he's back on his roof, but he cannot control time anymore.
He can't control time anymore until his girlfriend, Julia Cicero, comes up next to him, and she says, but what if you try to stop time for me? And because she's his muse, he can sort of stop time for her, and it becomes... They expand a little bit more on the metaphor and explain basically that they feel like the message of the movie is that artists stop time or interact with time in interesting ways through their art. Like a painting capturing a moment traps time and stops it forever, right? Or like a dancer dancing, right? It has somehow something to do with meter and rhythm and time, right?
Yeah, and an architect frees music into place.
Yeah, exactly. Architecture is frozen music, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I don't know, I guess it's a little...
It's more than a little. It's a lot.
Yeah,
it's very pretentious.
It's very pretentious. It's very self-aggrandizing. It doesn't really mean much for the rest of the movie. None of the rest of the movie really like draws on the specific element of stopping time in any particular way. It's another one of these messages that kind of goes nowhere with the rest of the movie. It means
that day Francis Ford Coppola showed up early, locked himself 4 hours into the thing,
and thought about
delegated no authority, smoked a bunch of weed, thought about how cool he is, Francis Ford Coppola, and then he wrote a bunch of lines, and then he gave them for them to recite.
All right, let's move along.
Oh, and here they officially, I would say, this is the beginning of their romantic, explicitly romantic relationship.
Right, and so
they've been flirting.
They fully commit to one another. Yeah. So let's just progress through the movie a little bit. Their relationship will eventually grow and foster, and they eventually have a kid. They have a talk with the dad, the mayor, about this. He's very not pleased.
Have we talked about Sunny Hope yet?
Well, we've mentioned her. We haven't mentioned and that she died, and that the mayor was we didn't mention this. The mayor, Franklin Cicero, one of the reasons he and Caesar Catalina have bad blood between them is Franklin Cicero was the DA convicting Franklin Cicero of murder, or attempting to convict Franklin Cicero.
Caesar Catalina.
Caesar Catalina convicted of murder for his wife. This all happened before the movie. It didn't work. Caesar Catalina got free off the charges. But we learn about Sunny Hope and that she died while this is Caesar Catalina's ex-wife. She died while pregnant, that this inspired him to make, what is it called? Megalon. That his negative character traits drove her to suicide because she thought that he was cheating on her. It's never clear if he actually was cheating on her. Well, seems like he was, though.
Seems like he was.
Because there was lipstick on the cigarette, and he wasn't wearing it, so...
And, she was like, who was in our house?
Yeah, who was in our house smoking? And, if you think about it, Aubrey Plaza wears lipstick the entire movie, so maybe it was her.
That's true, maybe it was but I don't know, I feel like considering in how much man pain he is about his dead wife, I feel like if Aubrey Plaza was the person that like basically led this thing, he wouldn't still be sleeping with her.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't be.
That's the one admirable trait about him, is that he is actually sad.
He is actually sad about what he's done to his wife. So their relationship develops along that trajectory. In the meantime, do you want to tell us about this satellite?
Oh, I thought you were going to tell you what Claudio gets up to. Yeah, so for the entire movie, every once in a while, we cut to this Soviet satellite. That really dates the movie.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how he just never chose to change it.
Yeah.
So this prestige of the Roman Empire and and America.
I guess these are like the Soviet Persians or something.
Yeah, I was about to say, who are the Soviets? Is it Persia?
Yeah, I guess.
Is it? The thing is,
it could be. I mean, for the timing, right? Since we're towards the end of the Republic, if you kind of unfocus your eyes, yeah, exactly. You could, if you kind of unfocus your eyes on the timeline and kind of compress the last 200 years of the Republic together, it could be Carthage. I don't know.
Sure,
it could be the Phoenicians.
Yeah. So this satellite is like constantly kind of like falling because it's like they lost control of it, the Soviets.
Yeah, it looks damaged.
At the beginning,
I think what the movie is trying to tell us is that this is a satellite that's been up there since like the Soviet Union, but has now become like damaged and unrepaired because the Soviet Union isn't around anymore. That was my interpretation. I don't know if that's true.
I don't know.
But it's got nuclear fuel on it, as all smart satellites do.
I don't know. This satellite is
it's crazy because it's got nuclear fuel on it, but also clearly visible solar panels.
And it's also like a Sputnik. like
who made this thing?
We don't have...
Who approved this?
We don't have nuclear-powered vehicles yet. Hopefully never.
Can you imagine that you get into a car crash, it's just Chernobyl?
Yeah, like maybe an interstellar spaceship could justify a nuclear. Like satellites, they have the space.
Yeah,
they have space. They don't even have the atmosphere or the ozone layer.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, it's really weird, but it's just like it's like a cutaway gag. Every once in a while, we cut back to the satellite, and we are reminded that it's going to fall into Terra Nova.
It's going to fall over Labrador.
Labrador. Sorry, different dog breed. Over Labrador. And then at some point, two parts of the satellite essentially detach. It splits into a Sputnik and a trash can. And I think the Sputnik bit basically starts like these two parts, of course, move differently.
Yeah.
And it sounds like this happened so late in the game that there's no time to calculate a new trajectory.
Yeah.
And guess where one of these satellites falls?
New Rome City, baby.
New Rome City, baby. So if there was any question about should we demolish the old city or not, don't worry.
That question is gone.
The question is gone because the satellite takes down a bunch of buildings.
Yeah.
And also the scene is incredible.
The whole movie does like this thing of like poetic realism. Like this idea that like what you're being shown in the movie is a visual metaphor for what's actually happening much of the time, not all of the time, but much of the time. And the one moment I thought was cool is when this Sputnik bomb drops, it kind of goes down, which causes shadows to rise up on the buildings, right? Naturally. And the shadows that rise up on the buildings aren't just normal shadows, though. They're in the shapes of people cowering before the sky, right?
Yeah.
And that was kind of cool. That worked on me. I like that.
Yeah, that was like an interesting artistic choice instead of showing us just like the city blowing up.
Yeah, instead of just like blowing up a 3-year-old or something.
I guess. They wouldn't have to. They would just like show the building go down like in an alien invasion movie or whatever. But I think, maybe it was a budget thing.
Yeah.
Just like probably cheaper, but it looked good.
I do think poetic realism is cheaper. The VFX in this movie are not convincing.
No.
Like, they don't make you believe the thing is real. Now, you could say, but the whole point of these VFX is to look uncanny and semi-realistic and semi-not realistic. But I would argue there's definitely parts of the movie where it doesn't feel like an artistic choice. It feels like a junky budget consideration. Which, again, as you said at the start of the episode, he fired his whole VFX department throughout the course of the movie. I think it shows.
Yeah. And you can say that it's on purpose, but also like it still looks bad.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. It's kind of like the self-serious like troll attitude that people have online, where they're like, "Oh, well, I got you mad. Well, I meant to get you mad." It's like, "Wow, dude, you just tripped and fell on your face." But I meant to. You still tripped and fell on your face.
Yeah.
I meant to make shit art, and you succeeded, I guess.
Yes. So this satellite, if I connect the dots correctly, because this movie is just like subsequent series of scenes,
a series of events that happens to you.
Basically, people were getting mad. People in poorer residential areas were getting mad at Caesar that he was blowing up all these residential buildings to make space for his city of the future.
Which is not really surprising.
Yeah.
If some developer blew up the building I was living in for some city of the future that has yet to be built for the next 10 or 20 years, I think I would be legitimately frustrated with that. Yeah. And I think one of the weirdest...
Megalon has like instant architecture.
Exactly. I think one of the things that's the weirdest about this movie is how unsympathetically it portrays the needs of the impoverished who have nowhere to go and nowhere to live, whose housing is built up in favor of an idealistic future project that may never come to pass. And like one of the main things about, and this is, at least this movie has me thinking about some tension, right? And that's cool. But I really think the movie is like surprisingly uncritical of the callous nature in which Caesar Catalina says, basically, I don't care if you're starving now, I'm caring for the future 20 years from now, and that's so much more important. Where I would argue, actually, no, the now is more important. In 20 years, we can take care of what's happening in 20 years, right? And if the impoverished die here, right, or suffer here,
they're not gonna...
you act as though they have no potential, as though they're no part of the future.
Yeah.
What about the ideas that these people have? What about the creative potential of these people? The potential for these people to teach and learn, ask the important questions of one another, and perfect their bodies and minds.
None of them are as creative and genius as Caesar Catalina.
Exactly. They're all viewed as like, in one part of the movie, one of the bad guys calls them mongrels, but I really feel like that's how the movie, not just that bad guy views it, it feels like that's the subtext of the movie for me. I think that poor people are kind of these disregarded mongrels you don't really need in society unless you need a momentary platitude about how, quote unquote, the people suffer or something like that.
Lower classes and immigrant classes definitely feel like, I think like the attitude of that bad guy is definitely portrayed as wrong.
Yeah.
But I think that what the movie settles on is kind of like that they are kind of like uneducated masses that need a gentle guiding hand from a great man, or they will be co-opted and instrumentalized by populist leaders such as Claudio. Claudio, our left-wing, depraved, gender-bending monster, sister fucking monster from Act 1, in the second act becomes a populist right-wing leader that basically rallies up these people in a very unsubtle parallel to like right-wing, alt-right-wing Trumpism in the US.
They all wear black and red caps.
Yeah.
And, there's all sorts of like...
Yeah. They literally wear the red hats. And this guy basically like in a with very little effort basically like tells first his like second in command, who is calling them mongrels, that he's wrong, and he tells them these are voters.
These are citizens.
These are citizens with voting power. And then he basically grabs a megaphone, throws some money around, grabs a megaphone, and then he tells them power to the people, culture for culture.
Yeah.
And then like that's it. They're with him.
They're with him. Yeah, I think you're totally right. The movie represents these people as easily misguided, manipulatable, short-sighted people who need the intellect and guidance of a great man, right? It's really a very anti-democratic movie in that sense. And there's actually quotes that they share, which I thought was very funny.
From Marcus Aurelius.
About how you don't want to live life in the majority. You want to find your authentic self amongst the insane, right? And what is Marcus Aurelius talking about in this quote? I don't know. I don't even know if this is a Marcus Aurelius quote. But if it is a real quote, right, I could imagine there's many different ways to interpret it. For example, don't be a people pleaser. Be yourself, right? That's one way to view it. Or maybe he's literally talking about how, like, democracy is bad. He was an autocrat after all. I wouldn't take his opinion on it, right? So, yeah, anyways.
I'm just going to throw it there. Yeah. Marcus Aurelius. Imperial time, right?
Yeah.
So, we're not at the Republican time?
Yeah.
We already passed that. But it's Cicero.
Well, it's new Rome, right? They seem to be aware to some degree of the things of old Rome, but they don't of the history of old Rome.
But they reuse the names.
But they reuse the name, and nobody thinks it's eerily odd how all the same names are coming together.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think it might be called New Rome because of just New York City.
Yeah, exactly, right? I think that's... But it says at the start there was that thing, like, can we hold our new Rome unlike the old Rome, which fell, right? But it's also funny because they have like these quotes throughout the movie where it's like, if the bread and circus falls, Rome falls, and if Rome falls, the world falls. And it's like, as it did when Rome fell. The world is over, don't we know it?
Yeah.
But obviously, I guess that's meant metaphorically.
We all found those giant pillars of morning prayers that the Mayan carved to mourn the fall of the Western Roman Empire.
Yeah, exactly. The Han Chinese, that were like, or the Han Chinese, who were like, "Oh no, Rome has fallen. We're so sad."
Yeah. Also, man, I like to think that he came up with a Roman thing and fall of civilization early, because that means that he actually conceived that America was falling like in the 1980s.
Yeah.
It's very like follow up to our Lovecraft episode where Lovecraft was talking about the West was falling.
Yeah. The West is perpetually falling.
As I said in that episode, once a century, the
Yeah.
West falls.
I feel like the West is in a continual process of falling, but somehow upwards.
If only there was a word for that.
It's always falling apart, and yet strangely, it seems to only grow more powerful and influential.
Much like the Eastern Roman Empire.
But yeah, so that's what Claudio's up to, right? So while Caesar's relationship with Julia is blossoming, and
they're having a child,
and Frank Cicero is very unhappy with it, and he's exchanging his view, and Megalopolis is being built in the ruins of this atomic destruction. Claudio is sort of rabble rousing, and eventually decides that he needs to get rid of Caesar. So how does he does that? He hires a 12-year-old assassin.
No. His second in command.
His henchman
reads through the lines and understands that what Claudio wants is ready to become the coldest 12-year-old.
The coldest 12-year-old. This kid is not nervous at all. He's not scared at all. He handles the knockback of the gun perfectly. It's funny. I mean, it's like I don't know. For me, I guess it's just like after watching Breaking Bad, right? It's so funny because like this kid acts like Mike Ehrmantraut, right? But he's 12, right?
Yeah, like who's the name of the Nazi blonde guy who joins their team in season 5?
Oh, yeah. I don't remember his name,
Yeah.
but yeah, that guy.
Yeah, that guy who shoots a child with
Yeah.
knows the single emotion in his face.
Exactly.
Same emotion that this 12-year-old displays when he shoots point blank in the face.
Yeah. Caesar gets shot in the eye, in the head.
Yeah.
But fortunately, there's Megalon and a lock of hair from his wife
That they find.
that the doctors found. He didn't have it on him.
Found. That's so weird. Because it's a big deal.
That doctor someone needs to do a background check on that doctor.
It's crazy because it's kind of stated through the movie that like the body of the wife was never found.
Yeah, she drove off the bridge into the river, right?
Yeah.
And she was never
and
found.
later it becomes we sister out that actually sister has been hiding that body this whole time.
Yeah,
that body exists, but it's hidden. So
Yeah.
where the fuck does the hair come from?
Yeah.
Well, you know where it comes from?
From him, I guess.
Earlier version of the script. That's where.
Yeah, exactly. So the Megalon and the hairlock halfway repair Adam Driver. Don't worry. In about 2 scenes, he's going to pull off his bandage and it's going to be fine. There's some weird trippy stuff with what the Megalon does to his eye, and there's some visions and stuff, but it's ultimately meaningless to the script, so I don't know. I feel like we just shouldn't engage with it.
No. But it's important at this point. There's a kind of like conspiracy going on between Aubrey Plaza.
Aubrey Plaza's conspiracy.
Yeah. So Aubrey Plaza is
AKA Wow Platinum.
Wow Platinum is she's literally like she's married to Crassus, who is the leader of the bank, and she's trying to take the bank
from
away from Crassus so that she controls it.
Yeah.
But he signed a prenup.
Yeah. So she can't just divorce him and get half the bank.
Yeah, because the divorce him and get half the bank, or even if he dies, she doesn't get it. So assassination is not enough.
It goes instead to Claudio. I don't think we explained this, actually. They're all related, right? They're all related. Crassus is the father of Claudio.
Yes.
But so her plan, in not so many steps, involves seducing Claudio in a very awkward scene that I feel very sorry for Aubrey Plaza that she had to do with Shia LaBeouf. Then seduce him, get him to try and take over the bank for her in such a way that gets him cut out of the list of heirs, even though he's already not on that list, as established earlier on in the movie. But hey, who knows? Script edits. Then to replace the entire board of the bank, then to have herself voted in as the CEO and owner of the bank. This machination runs in the background with Claudio somehow still helping her, even though he got caught trying to take over the bank and got kicked out, which leads them both to confront Crassus at the moment of her victory, where she has control of the bank. They confront Crassus in his bedroom, where he is lying with a blanket over his lap, which is tenting up. And he says to them, "What do you think of this boner I got?" And then they look at him, and he flips the blanket off of his crotch, and he's actually holding a bow under there, a bow and arrow.
A normal bow?
No, a teeny tiny little bow.
Yeah. And is it a normal arrow with a normal metal point?
I guess.
But isn't it particularly shiny?
Oh, it is, yes. There's a little bling on the end of it when he pulls it out.
So artificial.
Yeah. He draws back the bow about 2 inches, and then the arrow fires off like it's been launched from an AK-47. It pierces Aubrey Plaza through her extremely revealing costume, which is... This movie is full of extremely revealing costumes and unnecessary booby nudity.
With a violent explosion of blood.
Yeah.
Absolutely unwarranted by those 2 inches.
Yes, and then he fires on Claudio and only hits him in the ass, and then the lower back. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Claudio gets away.
Final big charge.
Riots. All of a sudden, Claudio calls in riots because they're taking over the bank. Him and Aubrey Plaza were taking over the bank. They thought they were going to win this night. That's why they called up the riots, to somehow help with the takeover of the bank or to create instability in the city. This causes Franklin Cicero and Julia Cicero to flee the city, but then they return once the riots calm, which they kind of just do slightly suddenly, and then we see that there are still angry rioters. So there's very confused and mixed messaging at this point in the movie, because they're all still angry rioters and they are still a problem. And basically what they're rioting about is, where's our megalopolis? We've waited so long. Where is our megalopolis? So they're yanking at the fences of the construction site of Megalopolis.
And who is here to save us all and deliver us?
Yes, standing in the center of the construction site, like Jesus, who is referenced in the movie.
Who is referenced in the movie, which is...
Although most of the movie appears to believe in pagan Rome, not in Christian Rome.
Yeah, they celebrate Saturnalia, but there are Christmas trees.
They celebrate. It's crazy. There's a little moment where they celebrate Saturnalia. There's Christmas trees.
Yeah.
Pagan depictions of Roman gods.
Yeah.
Arabic script.
Yeah.
The
9-armed.
What's it called?
Candelabra.
Menorahs. Hebrew script, and I can't remember what else. So it's just kind of everything in the Western world. It's like all your top Abrahamic religions plus Roman thrown in.
Francis Ford Coppola read about Saturnalia. He said, "Oh, it's like Christmas, but not." And he was like, Hanukkah.
Exactly.
The thing that the Jewish and Muslims celebrate.
Here we go.
That's as far as I can tell how it's Roswell.
But yeah, so anyways, Caesar Catalina is standing in the construction site. Fortunately, the protesters are yelling, "Where's our megalopolis? We've waited so long." Fortunately, there's no tension. Megalopolis is actually already done. So what is Caesar Catalina?
They should be able to see it.
It's quite big. It's quite big. You should honestly know it's there.
Honestly, that climax, alleged climax.
I
don't remember what he says. I know he talks about the future and the greatness potential of humanity, but it's not different from all the other speeches he's held so far. He's not in conflict with anyone. He's standing alone on a stadium, his face being projected on giant screens, and he single-handedly just calms the crowd, which then turns back, goes to Claudio Pulcher, and is his Mr. Mongrel.
Yeah, and they beat him up and tear him apart.
And they string them upside down like Mussolini was strung upside down in Piazza Loreto in Milano. Do you get it?
In front of a giant $100 bill.
Yeah.
But they say to him basically like, "You lied to us, you fuck. Where is whatever now?"
You betrayed us.
Yeah, which is never really displayed in what manner they've been betrayed. We left out the part of the movie that you thought was the movie's plot, which I agree was actually the movie's plot.
Yeah, there's a part. But it doesn't really matter. But there's a part
where Franklin Cicero sits down Caesar Catalina.
Yeah, sits down Caesar Catalina. It's the point where Caesar Catalina is essentially, it seems like he's getting everything he wants.
Yeah.
And he's getting a son with Julia.
Yeah.
And he's being successful in developing his Megalon. He already has his own little Megalon house with IKEA kitchen inside. And essentially, Cicero, in this version of the script, has essentially nothing to offer him. So the dead wife body, which a man talked about earlier, never came up. Cicero essentially offers him his dead wife's body.
He offers him a confession.
Or a confession that he hid his dead wife's body.
Exactly. So he offers him a confession, and he says basically, if you leave my daughter, right, if you make her think that you don't love her, right, then
I will confess.
I will give you this confession, which is basically that I prosecuted you dishonestly back in the day. That I know where your wife's body is, right? I can weather any political storm, but I can't weather this, right? Big red envelope. It's implied that Caesar kind of goes through with this. I don't know. We got.
I suspect. So first, I suspect that in previous versions of the story of the script, when this was a better, tighter script.
Yeah.
This was not about a dead wife's body.
Yeah.
But this was about him getting to develop his Megalon, because that's kind of the core tension. They each want they're both in conflicts on two things.
Yeah.
Julia and developing Megalopolis.
Yeah.
So Cicero basically to me is offering one thing in exchange for the other.
And it makes a lot of sense because that's what, there's no other point in the movie where it really matters that Franklin Cicero is the mayor, right? The main reason it would matter for him to be the mayor is that he decides what you construct and where you can construct.
Yeah, and it's just like that. Moment stood out to me for how natural.
Yeah.
And it worked, and how well everyone's motivations were just like everything fit together. It was like what a natural moment. The wife's spot is a bit contrived, right? I still stand by the idea that that's not the original version.
That's not what it was.
But it still works.
Yeah.
But then, because of how much stuff there is in this movie,
that never really comes up again.
Yeah, we never get to really see what he decided. It's implied again that he actually went through with it for a short time. He pushed away Julia.
Yeah, because at one point Julia says, like Julia is walking with the Ciceros down the street together. So she's walking with her parents, right?
Yeah.
But
she sees
but Caesar is off to the side in a car on his own and lonely, right? And she sees him in the car and she says something like, I'm just going to visit him just to say hi, right? Which, for your partner who you're living together with, having a baby and you live in the same house, it's not really how you would treat them.
Yeah,
right?
It shouldn't be this awkward.
Like you would either go home with them, right? Because at the end of the night, you both live at the same house. Or you would just you probably wouldn't even say hi under other circumstances because I'll just see them at home. I don't need to come over and say hi for a second, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
this is the moment before Caesar gets shot in the head.
And then after he's shot, he apologizes to Julia, and it's unclear why.
Yeah, it's unclear what he apologizes to her for, and he says that he was desperate.
Yeah,
right?
And it makes sense that he's apologizing for lying to her about his feelings.
Because he was desperate about creating Megalopolis out of Megalon because it represents his dead wife. So anyways, this whole part of the movie happens in the middle and is never really referenced again. Anyways, after the amazing speech that is given by Caesar Catalina to the riotous mob, and the riotous mob takes care of Claudio,
we see Hitler.
The ball drops all of a sudden. Oh yeah, the ball. We do have there is a brief clip of Hitler doing a Hitler
Mussolini.
Salute.
We just see all of the human.
Yeah. So what he's talking about during that speech, where you're saying you don't remember what he says in that speech, it's something about what is the nature of man, and man is our gods, and what gods do we invent to serve ourselves? And I remember he had some line where he's like, "What is the soul but a bursting forth of consciousness?" Which I was also like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just
at some point in this movie, they talk about evolution and if humanity is inherently collaborative or hostile.
Yeah, inherently collaborative or warlike, and it's
collaborative.
Yeah,
that's
first off, obviously collaborative first, and secondly, obviously both.
Yeah,
that's how war works. It's one team versus another team. Well, what one-man wars are fought?
Yeah.
Those don't exist.
The struggle is to recognize more and more humans as part of the us group and not the other group, but we are collaborative because when it comes to the us group, we tend to always be collaborative. Anyways,
but yeah, so weird discussions on evolution. All of the technology stuff in this movie makes zero sense. It's all technobabble. It's all jumble, mumble, whatever, right? It's most people design an architecture based on the function and the form it's supposed to have. But what if you design it from the cellular level? And it just doesn't make any sense, right? Yeah. First off, literally speaking, there are no cells to it. But even metaphorically speaking, it doesn't make sense to design an architectural shape from a cellular level. That's too small a level for architecture. It doesn't.
Yeah. Also, biology, plants aren't evolved. Are also functionally evolved.
Yeah.
But their function is not to host tiny people. The cells don't have tiny bathrooms for a reason.
The signal that triggers gene expression. It was
we don't have time for that.
Yeah.
We can do an entire episode about the science of Megalopolis if you're willing to sit through the movie a second time for us to take notes.
I am not. So yeah, and basically at the end of the movie, I just wanted to briefly mention this. Once the riotous crowds are calmed, the ball drops, and it's Happy New Year's.
Yeah.
And we're saying Happy New Year's, and we're standing there. The Cicero family is happy. Caesar is with them. He's happy. Him and Julia are together. They're happy.
What has Crassus done?
Crassus gave away all his money.
All his money in his bank.
Based on what impassioned.
To Megalopolis?
To Megalopolis.
Megalopolis is not an institution, right?
No, just...
Did they give it back to the city? Did he create a foundation to fund
Megalopolis is already done by the time he does it. So
Megalopolis is a part of the city. It's not the entire city.
Yeah.
So what's the institution of Megalopolis?
Which is also funny because Megalopolis is not as big as New York City. So it's actually Megalopolis is quite small for most of the movie.
Keep blowing palaces down.
They keep blowing up parts of
and growing this weird plant city instead.
CGI of Megalopolis is very bad. Like the actual Megalopolis as it's shown at the end looks like, if you've ever seen like those like investor videos for like Dubai, like weird architectural projects or something like that,
Yeah.
it's basically that quality of CGI. Like it's obviously fake, immediately clear this is a demo for you to imagine,
Yeah.
which is weird because this is supposed to be the final Megalopolis. I'm sure someone would say, oh, the lens of ideal versus real is blending the poetic realism in such a
But
way.
as we said earlier, it's still ugly, man.
Yeah, it's still ugly. But so the ball drops. We place the baby on the ground. We promise that we will only build nobly. It is very funny to me that this is Franklin Cicero's concern, because Caesar was always clear he was trying to build a utopia. What else could building nobly be other than building a utopia?
He's a dangerous man.
The
Utopia sometimes turn to dystopia. That's a line from the movie.
Yeah, exactly. And then
a magical carpet. A magical
carpet appears under the baby, and the camera closes like a Looney Tunes thing, and the baby
says,
like,
well, that's all, folks.
Yeah, like, well, the baby coos. It does like, baby noises, and then the movie's over.
Yeah, and then there is the Pledge of Allegiance to Humanity.
Oh my God, you're so right. I forgot about that. Yeah, and then there's a modified Pledge of Allegiance that has this pledge to all of humanity, the species that we protect, and that pledges with one Earth indivisible, with long life, education, and justice for all. Yeah. So,
what a movie!
What a movie!
What a movie! What a man!
Yeah. So all the Rome metaphors are bad, but like we're both more on the Rome nerd side than on the not Rome nerd side. So maybe that's, I don't know. All the science is really bad too, but you and me are much more into.
If you want to make this movie, you don't have to make it also Rome, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're going to choose to make it Rome,
I feel like subtle Rome would have been much better. Just like subtle references to Rome, right? Would have been much better than calling it all New Rome, right?
Caesar Catalina.
Exactly, right? That's it, right? Just do that or something like that. Or not even. But like, I don't know. But like, slightly subtler references to Rome, I think would have worked much better than this alternate history future, which just draws your eye and makes you think about stuff that's not actually important to the movie, because it really just is New York and it really just is America. So
I have a thing.
The Rome stuff is bad. The science is bad. The CGI is bad. I want to get those out of the way, because I feel like these are like the most minor criticisms of the movie, right? Sure. These are just like small things to the side. And major things that I think are wrong with the movie, it has no real message at all. The message is really just, it's just cobbled together kludge of 27 different messages, which are all vaguely positive, mostly all poetic, and have no real inherent logic to them that the movie has provided, right? So I think the message and what the movie is about is really, really weak. The movie is really misogynist and actually very classist, and even the parts of the message that are communicated well, I overall disagree with. I don't think some architect in the top of his Manhattan Tower should decide how housing for the poor should be designed. I think he would do a bad job. Yeah. I think he should have an elected position. And I think in life, you should try, politically speaking, you should try and serve the majority.
And maybe it shouldn't be one person.
Yeah. I don't believe in this brilliant vision of the auteur. And I don't believe that professional creatives are somehow a different breed of human that produce higher quality insights and are necessary for us to bridge the gap to the future. I think the role of artists is important. But I think if a democratically elected mayor says we need to build a hospital, that person's probably right. I think that's, like, if that's what they need, then I think...
See, Nietzsche would say you have the mentality of a slave or of an ignorant sheep, a mongrel that needs a gentle guiding hand from an enlightened...
What is wrong with pragmatism? What is wrong with focusing on the moment, right? Let's focus on the moment and the future. Does it need to be an either or? Do we need to bomb houses in order to build affordable housing for the future? Is there no other way to do this?
No. Yes and no. Yes to the first, no to the second.
And then in terms of just like being a movie, the plot is very poorly done, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's just like non sequiturs, things that don't fit into one another.
Just
like
so hard
abandoned.
To follow. Like
it's so hard to follow.
The logical thread.
Yeah.
Like you have to keep thinking back about what happened 2 scenes ago, because the movie makes no effort gives you no help.
It's either too much plot or it's a normal amount of plot communicated so poorly that it becomes really hard to follow. But either way, it's exactly what you said. It's so hard you got to keep reminding yourself what's going on because time skips and the whole constellation of characters keeps changing, right?
Yeah.
Like, are they up? Are they down? Did something good happen to them? Are they in charge? Are they not in charge? Do they have their goal?
So, yeah.
I think, for instance, the first act of the movie could just be cut entirely. Like, I think you could just start the movie with everyone in their starting positions in the second act at the marriage. Like, you could just start the movie there. Like, I feel like the whole first act adds effectively nothing, right? Other than maybe the scene where Julia and him meet. And
well,
then,
it kind of, I mean, the first stuff, that part kind of, I mean, it introduces the character, right?
Yeah.
You get to know where White Platinum comes from in terms of, like, she started as a journalist.
Yeah.
So, like, her ambition.
But I feel like you could just start that. You could just start, like, at the wedding.
Sure.
And be like, how does it feel ending your journalistic career? Well, if I'm ending it for this, nothing could be better or whatever, right? And then just move on.
So, Cyrus, do you know Ayn Rand?
Yes, I've heard of her.
Yeah. What do you know about her?
I know about her philosophy that she very much lives in this worldview where if you're good things happen to you. And it's very much like the world of the lone gunslinger, the individualist libertarian who solves the problems on their own by being incorruptible and visionary and in charge.
Yeah. Yeah, she was.
And not listening to those cuck soy boys and their stupid regulations. Just want to hold you back with driver's licenses and zoning laws.
Exactly. And yeah, so Ayn Rand, very libertarian, very much believed in the idea of, like, great men, and that all relationships between people should be based on, like, essentially trade. We don't owe anything to each other, and the real moral good is to be selfish. Selfishness is the only true way to be moral. You can read up why.
Yeah.
But she wrote a little novel. A little novel that our friend Zachary Snyder is a big fan of. And he always wanted to adapt because he's a big Rand fan.
I see.
Yeah, called The Fountainhead. A 1943 novel by Russian-American author Ayn Rand, her first major literary success. The novel's protagonist, Howard Rourke, is an intransigent young architect who battles against conventional standards and refuses to compromise with an architectural establishment unwilling to accept innovation. Rourke embodies what Rand believed to be the ideal man, and his struggle reflects Rand's belief that individualism is superior to collectivism. Now, I won't read the whole plot, but The Fountainhead essentially is about this architect who really wants to build this, like, innovative skyscraper. And the, like, architectural establishment just wants to hold him back from his genius ideas because he's such a disruptor.
These faceless anonymous cucks who none of them are individuals and have interesting ideas. Only this guy's interesting and has cool ideas.
He. And all the women flock to him and wish to have sex with him.
Yeah.
And I bet that he does it in a very dispassionate and controlled way, and always smoking a cigar.
Yeah. Rational to the end.
Yeah, Ayn Rand was, like, notoriously very misogynistic. Not notably because she was a woman who believed in individualism. You'd think she'd be like, men and women deserve the equal rights to be, individuals, but no. Yeah, so he builds his skyscraper, despite basically everyone, the establishment telling him to not build his skyscraper his way. He does it anyways. And then what do they do? They take the project away from him, and they start working to, like, change it.
Yeah.
Because they told him to do it one way, and he's just ignoring the laws, And so what does he do? He sneaks in one night, plants a bunch of TNT.
Oh boy.
And he takes down his own building. And then, when he is brought to trial, to stand trial for all the damage that he's caused, he holds an impassioned speech in front of the crowd about how he would rather just see this building destroyed than see it, like, basically, like, ruined by these collectivist sheep. And it's such a great speech and moving speech that he walks free. Does he get a lawyer? No. He represents himself.
That's how court works.
That's how court works.
So why do you mention this? You feel like Megalopolis is just a rip-off of that?
I don't know, but I'm just gonna say this. I was very surprised when I was reading through the inspiration that Francis Ford Coppola noted for his movie, and he didn't bring this one up. I was like, no, but this is the thing.
Yeah.
When I first read about this movie being made, and I learned about this movie 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I read like the synopsis of like what the general plot was. I was like, this is the Fountainhead. But it's done by Francis Ford Coppola. So this will be interesting.
Yeah. It was
Turns out
interesting.
Interesting is such a word. It's very much like the word great.
Yeah.
You know? It's one of those words like many things were great. You know, the British Empire was great. The Depression was great.
Yes, exactly.
Such great things. Such many great things.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, what's your summary? What's your summary on Megalopolis?
I mean, I have one more analysis to make, but my general view on Megalopolis is like I already said it in the beginning. It just like feels like this passion project, which I believe at some point was probably at least a decent script.
Yeah,
like the all the parts for a good story are here.
Yeah.
But there's so many more parts.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. This is like, you know, there's a really cool TIE Fighter Lego set in this movie. Unfortunately, there's 170 other Lego projects also in this movie. So it's just kind of sludge. It's like a Valiant. It feels when you're watching it, I also got this sense of like somewhere in here, there is a Valiant original struggling against hundreds of revisions. You know what I mean? It's struggling against the insecurity of an 80-year-old man.
Yeah. And like, not that like first drafts are always perfect.
Yeah.
And like, but this really seems like he never stopped revising. And I don't know. I
mean, the fact that he was revising as it was being shot, right?
Yeah.
And there was improvisations as it was being shot. It really indicates, it's like, yeah, I don't know. You're right. He reached the probability cloud of where, and somewhere in that cloud is a good movie, but he couldn't get that last distance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To get to the actual point where not even the best version of this movie, right? But like a decent, a followable version of this movie, right? Yeah. And I think that's the thing. I feel like this movie uses like poetic realism, whatever that term means, as like
crutch.
As a crutch, exactly, right?
Sorry,
if you have a movie that's more surreal and where things don't exactly work like they do in real life and it's not as grounded, that's not an excuse. That actually makes your movie much harder. Yeah. You got to make everything click on an emotional level instead of on a physical level, right? But it still has to be intelligible to follow the plot. That's actually harder to do, right? Yeah. I feel like this movie is just a bad grounded movie that decided it was actually about poetic realism to cover up the flaws in its thing, right? And that doesn't work, right?
Yeah. So, while we were talking earlier, I'm sorry that I did this, but I actually checked what the Catalan conspiracy is about. Because I know that the Catalan conspiracy was a real thing.
Yeah.
But like, what was it about?
What was the Catalan conspiracy? Yeah, so, because you recognized this name early on, the Caesar Catalan.
Yeah.
And it's like, what is? Yeah.
So, Catalan, also known as Lucius Sergius Catalina. But I'll use the English Catalan here.
Yeah.
So this is from Encyclopedia Britannica. I'm reading. So this is the brief summary. Catalan was an aristocrat in the late Roman Republic who turned demagogue and made an unsuccessful attempt to overthrow the Republic while Cicero was a consul. So, now a little bit more.
Yeah, this definitely was in the podcast.
Catiline served under Pompey's father in the Social War of 89 and acquired an unsavory reputation as a zealous participant in Sulla's proscriptions, killing his own brother-in-law during them. He was acquitted of charges of fornication with a Vestal Virgin in 73. Remember, now we're counting down because they're like before Christ, so 89 comes before 73. And afterward became praetor in 68 and governor of the province of Africa in 67 to 66. Because Catalin was then under prosecution for extortion, a charge of which he was eventually acquitted. He could not stand for the consular elections of 65 or 64. Later, there was talk that he had planned to murder the consuls and seize the power in 65, but there is no solid evidence for this first Catalinian conspiracy. In 64, he failed to be elected Cicero against Cicero. Upon his last defeat, Catiline began to systematically enlist a body of supporters which wished to stage an armed insurrection and seize control of the government.
Yeah.
His proposals for the cancellation of debt and the proscription of wealthy citizens and his general championship of the poor and oppressed appealed to a variety of discontented elements within Roman society.
That's funny, actually, because that was in that final speech.
Yeah.
In that final speech on the Hill, he did say, let's get rid of debt or something like that.
Victims of Sulla's proscriptions who had been dispossessed of their property, veterans of Sulla's forces who had failed to succeed as farmers on the land awarded to them, opportunists and desperados and aristocratic malcontents. Then Cicero, who was consul 63, was kept fully informed. Cicero in the beginning couldn't stop his growing popularity. Eventually, Cicero denounced Catiline to the Senate in an impassioned speech, charging him with treason and obtaining from the Senate the ultimate decree, in effect a proclamation of martial law. Catiline withdrew from Rome on November and joined his army of destitute veterans and other supporters that had collected in Etruria. Despite these events, the Senate remained only partially convinced of the immediate danger that Catiline represented. And then later the conspiracy was absolutely proven because some documents were retrieved, and the suspects, his collaborators, were arrested by Cicero and executed, and eventually he lost against the Senate. So do you notice anything interesting if you compare?
Yeah, he's Claude. He's Claudio.
He's Claudio. Claudio is doing all the bad things at Catalina.
Yeah.
Claudio is being crucified, strung up for the sins of the real historical Catalina to keep Caesar Catalina clean of the crimes and only get the good stuff of being a hero of the people in the end.
Yeah, it's also just so weird with all the names, right? Because it seems like it's fully the Catalan thing, and then Claudius is later, right? The Julio Claudians are later than all of this part of history. So it's interesting.
And Caesar Catalina, the real Catalina, didn't invent magical cement.
Yeah. I feel like that's revision process, right? I feel like maybe he started being close to Claudio, and then slowly they split off Claudio or something. Especially after 2016, right?
Yeah.
Because this thing was continuously edited. It's interesting, right? It's it really feels.
Just for the audience to know, Claudio literally has some Trump lines.
Yeah.
Straight up. He says, if you fight, you have to fight like hell. If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a city anymore.
Yeah.
Which is that's the speech that Trump gave before the insurrection. And after that, they do an insurrection.
Yeah.
The Cicero and his family literally have to be shipped with an underground railroad, shipped to safety. With the fakest baby ever.
With the fakest baby ever. Yeah. It's interesting. It feels like Coppola put 7 interesting movie ideas in and mixed them up and got a bad movie out of it, because that's not how you make good focused art, right?
It's interesting.
I feel like this masterpiece really was his miscellaneous folder of cool ideas, and he showed no discipline when integrating these ideas, right? How sometimes for a D&D campaign you've got to be look, I know I have this really cool giants idea, but it doesn't work in this setting with all the other things I already have going on, I know chocolate is great, but it doesn't work in this dish that I'm currently making, right?
Don't add chocolate to lasagna, kids.
Yeah, exactly. Right? I've got a really great lasagna going, and this oranges and chocolate idea is interesting, but I've got to do it somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like this movie, it could have been good. Genuinely could have been good, and wasn't. And the reason it wasn't is, at the end of the day, probably Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you something about this series.
Mm-hmm.
I would ask you to put in order the movies from worst to best. From Avatar: The Last Airbender, viewing Rebel Moon as one 5-hour product, and then Megalopolis.
It's hard to judge. It's really hard to judge. Not because these movie makers are all different, very different people, and have been successful movie makers and auteurs in very different ways.
Yeah.
Francis Ford Coppola is at the end of his life. This is his last movie, and he's aware of it, and it's his like life passion project. And Zack Snyder is like very much not at the end of his life. Will still do a lot of projects, and like I don't want to be too mean, but he just has not produced the same amount of like quality movies that Francis Ford Coppola has produced. And he seems to be making the same movie over and over again, just doing whatever he thinks looks cool in the moment. And then you have Shyamalan, who's genuinely an artist, who's capable of coming up with interesting ideas, and like they're botched because he's like not as good as other movie directors, but he tries and he makes original ideas, and every once in a while he makes a really good one. And Avatar: Last Airbender was like such a misguided choice under so many like points of view, but like The Last Airbender is like an absolute outlier for Shyamalan, not just in terms of quality, but in terms of the type of movie that he's doing.
Yeah, but I'm saying
Rebel Moon.
Cut yourself off. Isolate yourself. I feel like you're already ranking them. I feel like you're Rebel Moon is the worst one. Rebel Moon is the worst one. It's like watching. It's like getting your teeth pulled.
No, because Rebel Moon, at the end of the day, in terms of filmmaking skills, is the best one.
Nah, yeah. I think Rebel Moon. Rebel Moon was okay. Here's my ranking. Okay, so you give me your ranking. I'll give you mine. Okay.
Okay, so I'm not saying that it's the best movie in general. I'm saying that in terms of like craft of making a movie, it's the best one because like it's shot properly. The effects generally look like
you understand what's happening from scene to scene.
You understand what's happening. The acting is like good to passable. And and like these other two movies don't, even with really good actors in the last one. And so like I mean, you start ranking them. You tell me what
I think I can rank them pretty easily. Rebel Moon commits the high crime of being 3 hours longer than the other two movies. It's too much. True. Like it's the Good Place quote. Sometimes you ruin something a little bit so you can have a lot more. Turns out the reverse doesn't work. Making something slightly better and then having a lot more of it. I would rather have a bad experience for 2 hours than have a mediocre experience for 5 hours.
Hey, do you want to eat like a small piece of shit or a giant cow shit? But we added some sugar.
Exactly. Right? Like, Rebel Moon is too long and too empty, and I feel like honestly has nothing for me to think about, even a little bit. Right? Sure. So I put Rebel Moon at the bottom. Then next, I think I actually put Avatar, the Last Airbender, the M. Night Shyamalan version. The movie was infuriating for me to watch. It made me angry. It made me so aware of its shortfalls at every moment. But I feel that Megalopolis, for the extremely many flaws it has, and it has extremely many flaws, and I will never watch this movie again. There's no reason to.
None of these movies should ever be watched again.
But if I had to watch one of these again, and that's basically how I'm approaching this listing, I think I would watch Megalopolis again because its fuzzy definitions and the fact that it's like 7 movies in superposition with one another gives you just enough to think about. And the vague anti-capitalist message is at least the most interesting, in my opinion, of the messages all the movies have. Now, you could convince me that Avatar is maybe slightly better, but I don't know. I think I would rather watch Megalopolis and send my sympathies out to Aubrey Plaza and watch Adam Driver do weird acting, right? And think about the vaguely capitalist messages and how this applies to US politics. And think about the good movie that could have been somewhere in this superposition, rather than Avatar, which just actively infuriated me every second that I watched it.
Yeah. I am personal ranking, very personal. I think that I will have.
Hey guys, by the way, all of this personal.
If you love these movies,
these are our uneducated moviegoer opinions.
If you love any or all of these movies, man, I mean, I don't know. Watch another one.
If you love all of these movies, I'm starting to... You know what I mean? Have you seen other movies?
Yeah, exactly. Have you talked to people?
Have you seen Boss Baby?
I feel like you'd love Boss Mate. The quality level is skyrocketing in time. Okay, no, I think I have I have your ranking. I invert the positions of Rebel Moon and Avatar: The Last Airbender.
So
I put The Last Airbender last.
Last Airbender last. Rebel Moon in the middle, and Megalopolis first.
Yeah, I have a lot of sympathy for generally M. Night Shyamalan, but like, man, out of these three, Avatar: The Last Airbender is the one where there is a template that is perfect. He took something that was perfect
and he broke it,
in so many ways, and seemed to have misunderstood. Like, his movie, more than the others, seemed to completely misunderstand like the way that character and plot are supposed to work. It's just a series of vignettes that roughly recapitulate the highlights of season 1, but it really fails, I think, more than the others at being a movie. Just like conceptually.
Like, there's no strong message that grips you, and then all the characters suck. And so it's kind of like no reason to be here, right? Because you're not interested in the world, you're not interested in the people, and the message is like really weakly delivered.
The shots are wrong. Like, the camera angles are wrong.
That is actually a point that we should mention. Yeah, so this is something that we mentioned, right? Rebel Moon and Megalopolis have their flaws, but generally speaking, they are competently shot. The music...
Rebel Moon more than Megalopolis. Megalopolis is some wonky stuff.
Yes, you're right. Megalopolis does have some really weird camera angles, and the CGI is not so great, right? But like, also generally the score is how it's supposed to be, right? There's no weird moments where the score contradicts what's happening on screen, right? And like stuff like that. And I do agree that when we were talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender, we were like, nothing about this movie is good.
Yeah,
like the choreography, bad. The acting, bad. The script, bad. The dialogue, bad. The pacing, bad.
The shots,
bad. The CGI, bad. Like, name any part of this movie, it's probably bad.
Even the dialogue as written. Like, not as delivered, but as written.
Yeah.
Like, can you find teachers? Teach you to teach you bending?
Yeah. And it's great. It's like everything but the credits was bad.
Even the credits was better than the rest. So that. Second,
there is like that baseline level of competence the other two movies showed in the other departments.
Yeah, Rebel Moons, like Zack Snyder, the action was nothing to like drive home at, but like there were good shots, there were interesting imagery.
Yeah,
like Zack Snyder is good at visual stuff, and in that movie,
there were just like choreographies that were interesting and that were tight enough and that worked.
Yeah, costumes and like aesthetics that were interesting. Did everything work together? No, not really. Like that,
but I do think you're right.
But
like,
there
was costuming and aesthetics that worked. Yeah,
exactly.
And like Megalopolis, less so. Like, the costuming on the men was mostly fine. On the women, again, it was kind of pretty
distractingly like offensive.
Yeah, a lot of the time. So, but like, so I feel like in terms of that competence, that like non-script competence, Megalopolis actually lies in the middle, right? It's kind of like the halfway point.
Yeah.
Rebel Moon, CGI worked. Right?
CGI worked.
Like, it wasn't... It didn't knock your socks off. It wasn't the best thing you've ever seen. But compared to the other two, like, it wasn't jarring. It wasn't like... It wasn't like, oh, I'm watching the Dubai promotional video about the Line project or whatever.
Exactly. So to me, Rebel Moon is a very long, empty movie that sometimes has something interesting to look at, or has an interesting score.
I think a 2-hour edit of Rebel Moon would beat both the other movies handily. Easily,
yeah. Just by being like a competent action schlock.
Yeah.
You know? And then finally, I don't want to repeat myself too much. Like, I don't want to repeat things I've already said, but mainly for the reason that you quoted, I would put Megalopolis is number 1. Yeah. It's just like so much.
Yeah.
And so interesting in its flaws.
Yeah.
That I don't know. I mean, I will have something to think about if I watch it again. In Avatar, I'll be mainly waiting for like the comedic highlights.
Exactly.
Like the guys doing the idle animation while Aang charges his attack for 5 seconds before he does his air blast, you know?
Yeah. I feel like Megalopolis does have that thin veil of like, is that intentional? Is that mean? Does that mean? I feel like Megalopolis will, to some degree, stick with me. Like, what was that about?
Yeah.
I feel like at 3 a.m. in the morning, I might wake up and be like, what the hell was that for?
What did he mean by that?
In a world with guns, why was it a bow? Did that mean anything?
Why did the kid not have a bow? Yeah. I want to just like little side note, but like in general, we should not be like critiquing like a movie that puts on a woman in a hot bikini. Like in general, we should not act like Puritans that like, oh no, our eyes, I don't want to come across like that.
Yeah.
Because like I think that sexuality, like every other aspect of human experience, has a place in art and in movies. And I think that not every revealing outfit needs necessarily to be like highly sexual. Not all nudity is sexual.
Yeah.
But the way that this movie did it was aggressively like objectifying and misogynistic.
Yeah, exactly.
And imbalanced. But especially, but also especially misogynistic. I wouldn't mind the imbalance as much if there was more variety in female characters, or in young female characters, because of course the old women, they are crones, as we know. They don't get scandal, they don't show any skin. But
like I agree with you, right? It's not bad that there is nudity in the movie. It's not bad that some characters in the movie wear revealing outfit. What's bad is that every female character in the movie wears revealing outfits for apparently no reason. They usually do not contribute to their personality in any meaningful way.
As a many times as a criticism of women who like express their sexuality in a more open way. And like it's crazy how like it seems like the arc for Julia is to go from like a sapphic club indulging lesbian who strips in clubs and gets pictures taken to like a good Christian mother who replaces Caesar's wife and gives him a daughter called Sunny Hope.
Yeah, I think they named the daughter.
They named the daughter Sunny Hope.
Yeah, there's really weird like lesbian exploitation in this movie as well.
In general, like sexualization of bad.
And it's like, I feel like her character dresses the same as Aubrey Plaza's character. The whole point of Aubrey Plaza's character is that she's using her manipulative feminine wiles to one gold dig Crassus and for the other to tempt Caesar Catalina, right? And then Julia, who's like the inverse of that character, dresses generally the same way for most of the movie.
No, especially not in public. We get a couple of like very revealing shots even towards the end of the movie, but that's kind of like in the intimacy of home, where like Caesar is also like shirtless in bed. But in the thing is that in the beginning of the movie, she's similar to Aubrey Plaza. We are introduced to her going to the club.
Oh my god! And I'm pretty sure, by the way, that is a racialized impression. Okay, like, I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be some kind of AAVE or something.
Okay, I don't know. I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Our next series doesn't touch the 10-foot pole. No, but yeah. So she's introduced as like very much like Aubrey Plaza, but over time she has a positive arc, while Aubrey Plaza arguably has a negative arc.
Yeah.
Like, Aubrey Plaza keeps getting worse.
Yeah, until she gets killed.
That's arguably the lowest point any human can.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that she's the most revealing at the end shows that she's at her most debauched.
She's at the most debauched. While towards the end in public, Julia's wearing always like elegant, but always like proper clothes.
There's this moment where there's a dead body of the wife.
Oh boy!
And she's just naked for no reason. Like she's in a morgue. She's literally the one place where they pull people out of the drawer and they're covered in a sheet, and then they lift the sheet. Right? If you need to see them, there's no sheet. She's just naked
and pregnant.
And it's just like, why? Why do we do this? Or there's just like random city goer women who are just like are free chested, just running around doing their thing, and it's like,
and no, they're not shot in a normal way at all.
Yeah, and it's like, why, like, and why are there no guys doing this, right? And why aren't there some women who do this and some who don't do this, right?
Yeah, we didn't even bring it up, this aspect, but I just pay quick lip service to it. it's interesting how in this society the women are shown to be like aggressively bisexual, considering this is supposed to be ancient Rome.
Yeah.
We didn't have any men no bisexual men going like, yeah, women are the duty, but for the pleasure it's with the boys.
Yeah, so I agree with you, right? The issue isn't, oh my gosh, my Christian movie has nips in it, right? Yeah. It's the way that it's done in such a one-sided way, and the way that it's done in such like a broad spectrum way, and in the way the movie clearly associates it with being negative, right? Yeah. So it's like being exposing too much skin is something only women do. All women do it. It's bad when they do it. That's what the movie's saying.
Yeah,
right?
And it's both like gazy and judgmental at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like if a Fast and Furious movie ended with Dominic Toretto covering up all the sexy girls at the races and going like, this is bad, follow Jesus Christ, family. At least the Fast and Furious movies have the decency of
the morgue scene's still gonna haunt me, I think.
The morgue scene,
it's just like so unnecessary.
That was so unnecessary. All right, okay, hey,
and they do it twice.
Yeah, we are doing it twice. We're approaching the 2-hour thing.
Let's wrap it up. We've said all that needs to be said about this movie, all that deserves to be said about this movie. Right. Do you have any plugs?
Yeah, I've watched episode 1 and 2 of The Last of Us season 2.
Oh, yeah.
I think episode 1 was a little bit slow. It was very much a time skip, new status quo, reintroduce us slowly to how things are now.
Yeah.
There were a couple of production choices that I found odd. My partner Copernicus was actually brought them up because they are very familiar with the games. So like they have kind of like prettied up a couple of female characters who were not really, who were like had a much more like grounded, like post-apocalyptic look to them, and now like very pretty, kind of like skinny in a way that they weren't in the game. And it's just kind of like odd, especially because like, where are you getting your makeup?
Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah, it's like it may be the apocalypse and we may not have bandages or water to drink, but I'll be goddamned if the women don't have razors and aren't, And
it stands out because it's really not a pervasive problem.
Yeah.
Like at this point, the season 2 starts in a settlement with a lot of people. And like most of the women, including protagonists, look like as they would look in reality in this environment. So it kind of stood out.
Yeah.
It stood out that it happened. But like in general, episode 1, a bit slow, but like fine, and they did a good job with world building and silent exposition. And then episode 2, so let's really get hot.
Yeah.
And I think they made some changes to a very important scene of The Last of Us 2. That was interesting to watch Copernicus react, because for me it's all more or less new. I knew one thing was going to happen, but I didn't know how. So what they changed was the how.
Yeah.
And so for Copernicus, it was interesting watching them be going like, I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen. I know what must happen, but I'm not sure how all the pieces fit together, right?
Yeah.
And they added secondary conflicts to keep them tense. Where like, I know what's going to happen in the A plot, but I don't know what's going to happen in the B plot, and we're genuinely concerned about some characters.
Yeah.
So I think that the work of adaptation keeps being good. The philosophy of adaptation of the show keeps being good. I hope the quality remains consistent.
Yeah.
But yeah, so far, first 2 episodes, had a good time.
I think we've plugged the Brandon Sanderson books before.
We talked about them before. Maybe if you want to plug something that is not Stormlight, like Tress. I'm reading it, by the way, now.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, it doesn't capture me like Stormlight.
Yeah, it's not the same.
No, it's not the same.
It's like it's a lighthearted Princess Bride-esque romp.
Very much so.
Instead of Brandon Sanderson is a great author and has written a lot of great books, but I don't have a specific one in mind that I want to plug. So instead, I'm going to plug a different book that I like a lot. It has nothing to do with the episode, but Sapiens, written by Yuval Noah Harari, is a great book on the history of humankind.
I know why it came into your head.
He has many other great books, but I felt Sapiens was a really great book for me to read. I read it when I was 18, so it was like, for me, it completely changed my worldview in some ways regarding what history looks like. That history isn't some linear arrow that just points towards better and better, but that there's ups and downs, good times, bad times, so there's actual dynamics to how these things develop. And I thought it was just a great foundational text for someone to read who wants to understand kind of where we've sort of come from. What's the momentum going into the present moment, right? And yeah, I recommend it. I think it's a really great book. It's obviously it's a history book, right? It's not fantasy. It's not entertainment in that sense, right? It's a history book, but it's a great summary of the whole history of the world, and that's a really difficult and impressive task. And he does a really good job in *Sapiens*. So if I could pick one book for everyone to read, it would be that one. And so I'm plugging it.
But what is history if not a story about ourselves that we tell ourselves to understand ourselves better?
Yeah,
That's what Coppola would write.
Exactly. What is history if not the soul coming to know its own consciousness in the process of betterment and learning?
Mm-hmm.
Or something.
And then all the women would go like, oh, such genius. There's such genius, this Caesar Catalina.
All right. That'll just about do it for episode 28 of the Friendly Orbit podcast. You can find us on youtube.com/@afriendlyorbit, as well as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you want to drop us any feedback, any astral echoes, you can message us at afriendlyorbit@gmail.com. All one word.
All right, Sirius. I'll talk to you later. And to all of our fellow Voyagers, we'll catch you out there at the club.
No!